All right, so you guys sent in a ton of articles about this whole Canada-U.S. trade thing, and, well, let's just say it's a lot.
Yeah, definitely complex. Lots of moving pieces here.
Yeah, it's not just like interest rates, it's like global trade and politics and like how people are feeling about the economy too.
Consumer confidence, right? All tied in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, anyone just tuning in, let's do a quick recap.
Okay, sounds good.
So Trump, right? President Trump, he's talking about putting these huge tariffs on stuff coming in from Canada, like 25%.
Yeah, across the board, basically.
And economists are saying,
Oh, they're saying it could really slam the brakes on Canada's economy.
yeah, some are even saying
Recession.
Yeah, exactly. Recession.
And on top of all that, the Bank of Canada, they've got this big meeting this week to decide about interest rates.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Huge decision.
So do they cut rates to try and offset,
The damage from the tariffs?
yeah, or do they stay put?
Lots to think about.
Okay, so back to basics for a sec.
Sure.
Remind us, what does the Bank of Canada even do?
Well, their main job is to keep the economy stable and predictable, right?
Right.
So they manage inflation. They try to keep it around 2%.
Okay.
And they set interest rates to try and keep things moving smoothly.
So like raising and lowering rates?
Yeah, think of it like the gas pedal on a car.
Okay, I like that.
So they can tap the brakes by raising rates, which makes it more expensive to borrow money and slows things down.
Okay.
Or they can hit the gas by lowering rates to encourage borrowing and spending, which, stimulates the economy.
Right, makes sense.
Trying to find that sweet spot.
So where are we at right now with interest rates?
Right now, they are at 3.25%,
Okay.
which is actually at the top of what they call their neutral range.
The articles mention that neutral range. What is that exactly?
So that's basically the range where the Bank of Canada thinks interest rates aren't really pushing the economy one way or the other.
So not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly, the Goldilocks zone.
I see.
But the question is, with this whole tariff thing brewing,
Hmm.
do they need to shift out of neutral?
Yeah, that is the question.
Big question.
Economists seem pretty worried that a full-blown trade war with the U.S. could, really hurt Canada.
It wouldn't be good.
Yeah,
We're talking recession territory.
well, and the Bank of Canada's own research shows.
Yeah, their research shows that a 25% tariff could actually, shrink Canada's GDP by 6%.
6%. Wow, to put that in perspective.
Yeah, that's way more than what happened during the 2008 recession.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Definitely a big deal.
So let's talk about these tariffs, the Trump card, as some are calling it.
Right.
Which industries in Canada would be hit hardest if those tariffs actually happened?
Well, tariffs are basically taxes on imported goods.
Right.
So any industry that depends a lot on selling stuff to the U.S. is going to feel it.
Makes sense.
The auto industry is a big one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They're really integrated across the border, so those tariffs would mess up supply chains and probably make cars more expensive.
For everyone.
Yep, both Canadians making them and Canadians buying them.
Ugh. Okay, what else?
Lumber is another one that always seems to get caught in the crossfire.
Always.
And agriculture, too. They face some big challenges.
Yeah, okay, so we got these potentially disastrous tariffs looming,
Yeah.
plus a slow economy that's not really growing as much as we like, and then there's inflation, too.
You're right.
The article said inflation is sticky right now.
It is.
Can you break that down for us?
So sticky inflation just means it's not coming down as easily as everyone hoped.
Okay.
Part of that is because of this temporary tax holiday,
Oh, right.
which has kept some prices artificially low.
Okay.
But once that holiday ends in February, we'll get a better sense of what's really going on with inflation.
So if inflation stays high,
Yeah, if it's stubborn.
that puts the Bank of Canada in a tough spot.
It does.
So how does inflation affect their decision about interest rates?
Okay, so typically to fight inflation, a central bank would raise interest rates.
Right.
Because that makes borrowing more expensive, which cools down spending and helps bring prices down.
Right.
But in this case,
Yeah, in this case.
if they raise rates to fight inflation, it could slow down the economy even more.
And that could make the effects of the tariffs even worse.
Exactly.
But if they cut rates to try and help the economy and offset the tariffs,
Then you risk making inflation even worse.
that's a real dilemma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No easy answers here.
Tough choices all around.
Yep. Tough choices. It's a tough situation for sure. And then on top of everything else,
Yeah.
you've got the whole question of how Canada might respond to these tariffs.
Oh, right. Retaliation.
Exactly.
Some of the articles mention that if Canada, hits back with its own tariffs on U.S. goods, it could actually force the Bank of Canada to raise rates.
Yeah.
How does that even make sense?
Well, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but there's a logic to it.
Okay.
So if Canada puts tariffs on American stuff,
Yeah.
it makes those things more expensive for Canadians.
Right. Makes sense.
And that can lead to even more price increases.
Which fuels inflation.
Exactly. And in that scenario, the Bank of Canada might feel like they have to raise rates to try and get inflation under control.
Even though that could hurt the economy in other ways?
It's a tough call, but yeah, they might feel like they have no choice.
So retaliation could actually backfire on us.
Potentially, yeah.
Make prices go up even more and force the Bank of Canada to raise rates.
It's a real possibility,
It's like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
pretty much.
And then there's always the risk that, like, one tariff leads to another and another, and
Tit-for-tat escalations
Yeah.
could spiral into a full-blown trade war.
which would be bad for everyone.
Definitely bad for both the U.S. and Canada.
Ugh. Okay, so we've got the Bank of Canada trying to figure out this interest rate puzzle,
Right.
trying to balance inflation with the possibility of a recession.
Right.
And then we've got these tariffs hanging over our heads and the possibility of retaliation.
Lots of uncertainty.
So much uncertainty. It's a lot to take in. But one thing I've been wondering about is, like, what about the Canadian government?
Yeah, good.
Do they have a role to play in all of this?
Absolutely. They
Yeah.
can't just sit back and watch.
Right.
A lot of economists are saying the government needs to be proactive here, using what they call a complementary policy approach.
Complementary policy, what does that even mean?
So basically it means the government can use things like spending programs and tax adjustments to try and cushion the economy.
To protect us from the tariffs or a recession.
Exactly. Like, for example, they could invest more in infrastructure projects.
Oh, like roads and bridges and stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That creates jobs and stimulates the economy.
Right.
Or they could offer tax breaks to businesses that are getting hit hard by the tariffs.
So it's about the government and the Bank of Canada working together.
Exactly. Using different tools to try and steer the economy in the right direction.
Okay, that makes sense.
The Bank of Canada focuses on monetary policy, which is mostly about interest rates, and the government has fiscal policy, which is about spending and taxes.
So they can work together to kind of balance things out.
Exactly.
This is all very interesting, but, like, what does it actually mean for everyday Canadians?
Yeah, good question.
Like, what can people do to protect themselves financially, given all this uncertainty?
That's a big question that a lot of people are asking.
Yeah, for sure.
And while we can't predict the future, there are definitely some things you can do to be prepared.
Okay, let's hear them. What's your top advice?
Well, first of all, review your budget.
Okay.
Make sure you know exactly how much money is coming in and how much is going out.
Right.
And see if there are any areas where you could cut back if you need to.
Good old-fashioned budgeting.
It's always a good idea, but it's especially important when things are uncertain.
Okay, what else?
Think about your debt. If you've got high-interest debt like credit cards,
Yeah,
now might be a good time to focus on paying that down.
because interest rates could go up.
Exactly. It could get even more expensive to carry that debt later on.
Okay, good advice. What about investments, though?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Should people be changing their strategy with all this going on?
Well, investing always has risks,
Right.
and it's important to have a diversified portfolio that matches your long-term goals.
Okay.
It might be tempting to make big changes based on, what's happening in the news,
Yeah, for sure.
but often the best thing to do is stay the course with your long-term plan.
Don't panic.
Exactly. The market usually rewards patience and discipline.
Stay calm and carry on.
Something like that.
Any other words of wisdom?
Stay informed, but don't let it consume you.
Good advice.
There's a lot of noise out there, so focus on reliable sources of information.
Right,
And remember, you don't have to figure this out all on your own.
right.
Financial advisors can be really helpful,
Yeah, they can create a personalized plan for you and help you stay on track.
especially during times like these.
So much uncertainty.
Yeah, but we'll get through it.
We always do. All right, well, it feels like we've covered a lot today.
We have.
A lot riding on the Bank of Canada's decision this week.
Definitely a big one.
But hopefully our listeners feel a little more prepared to deal with all this.
I hope so.
Yeah, it really shows you how connected everything is.
It does.
What happens in the U.S. doesn't stay in the U.S.
Nope.
It affects everyone else, too, especially us up here in Canada.
We're all part of the same global economy.
Exactly, whether we like it or not. So let's talk more about what the Canadian government could do.
Oh.
You mentioned infrastructure spending.
Yeah.
Are there any, like, specific projects or areas they might focus on?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about green infrastructure,
Oh, yeah.
things like renewable energy and sustainable transportation.
Smart.
Not only would that create jobs and boost the economy in the short term,
Right.
it would also help position Canada as a leader in, the whole shift to a low-carbon economy.
So a win-win.
Exactly. Good for the economy and good for the environment.
I like it. Are there other things they could do maybe on the trade side?
Yeah.
Like, could Canada try to, diversify its trading partners?
That's definitely something people are talking about.
So we're not so reliant on the U.S.
Exactly. Canada's been working on free trade agreements with countries in Europe and Asia and Latin America.
Oh, wow.
The idea is to open up new markets and reduce our dependence on the U.S.
It's a long game,
It is.
but it could really pay off in the long run.
Yeah, make our economy more resilient.
Right. So it sounds like there's a lot that both the Bank of Canada and the government can do.
There is.
But ultimately, it comes down to making some tough choices,
Yeah,
balancing different priorities.
that's the job.
So what do you think the Bank of Canada is going to do about interest rates this week?
Honestly, it's really hard to say.
Cut them, hold them, or even raise them?
There are good arguments for all three options.
Yeah, I can see that.
If I had to guess,
Yeah.
I'd say they'll probably go for a small cut,
Okay.
maybe 0.25 basis points.
So like a tap on the brakes, but not a full-on slam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just a little nudge to signal that they're paying attention to the risks
Without freaking everyone out.
and risking even more inflation.
Right. Makes sense.
And remember, this is just the first step.
Right.
They'll keep watching the situation closely and adjust their policy as needed.
So buckle up.
It could be a bumpy ride, but the Canadian economy is strong.
We've been through tough times before.
Exactly, and we'll get through this too.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
U.S. tariffs, the Bank of Canada's interest rate dilemma, the possibility of retaliation.
Government spending, fiscal policy.
It's a lot.
It is.
What's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the main takeaway is that while there are definitely challenges ahead,
Yeah.
it's important to stay informed, make smart financial decisions,
Right.
and remember that you're not alone in this.
We're all in this together.
Exactly. We'll get through it together.
Well said. So what do you think the Bank of Canada will do? And what does all this mean for your own personal finances in the coming months? Keep an eye on those headlines because things could change fast. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Canada's economic outlook. We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious.